गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। आज हम जा रहे हैं श्रीलंका। जब चाइना के अंदर मार्केट क्रैश हो रहा है, मिडल ईस्ट के अंदर और मिसाइल फायर होने जा रहे हैं, राइट? और यूक्रेन लड़ाई में युद्ध विराम की बात हो रही है, गाजा में भी युद्ध विराम की बात हो रही है। तो हम कहाँ जा रहे हैं श्रीलंका और क्यों जा रहे हैं, ये इम्पोर्टेंट है। कि हम श्रीलंका इसीलिए जा रहे हैं क्योंकि Anant Mishra is today in Sri Lanka and he has interacted with a whole lot of people in Sri Lanka and उसके बारे में हमें लाइव अपडेट मिलने वाला है from Sri Lanka. Anant, welcome to Gunner Shot. It's nice to see you there in Sri Lanka. So how's Sri
Sir,
Lanka doing?
thank you for hosting me, sir. And Sri Lanka is progressing. Let it be the opening remark of my current discussion with you, sir. It is developing. There is a lot of infrastructure development happening, even where I am. It really looks to the way that Sri Lanka is coming out of the China debt that and it is coming out of the insecurity, the political insecurity which forced people, economic insecurity that forced people out for the protest. So things are changing, sir. Things are really developing. There's a sense of positivity back among people. Now the positivity is not reflected in the economic framework, sir. There is inflation. Inflation is very high, which even I, as an outsider who's essentially dealing with dollars and exchange, is experiencing it. And now I can't imagine for a local Sri Lankan who's have to exchange, who doesn't have the ability to exchange, but is getting a salary in Sri Lankan currency. And this is something that I felt personally, sir. So yes, inflation is, and I've spoken to during my stay here. I've had the privilege of speaking to a lot of columnists, a lot of economists, a lot of reporters and journalists who've been covering not only this but also what the global market implications on this is. And their projections are pretty high, sir. So they're projecting that the debt is going to there's a they are hoping that the Sri Lanka does not go on default again. Some are saying that there's going to be increase in petrol hikes. There was a decision taken by the government to go into electricity module, but the project stopped, put a halt, because they didn't know, if they can introduce electric vehicles or have the resources or the infrastructure to even build it. So there was trying to move out of the fuel, which gives me the impression that they were trying to uh, go into natural resource rather than saying maybe the fuel prices was going to surge. So it's better that we go for an electric vehicle. But then the installation cost, the infrastructure required for it, as well as the continuous electricity supply, that would have hit their policies, so that it came to a complete halt. So I've had the luxury of speaking to a lot of local Sri Lankans, the auto walas, the shopkeepers, the hawkers, and everybody is of the opinion that this inflation is kind of it's taking the life out of them, sir. If I may use this word, because now imagine. The basic items, the basic food prices being increasing to a level which really becomes difficult for a common individual to buy wheat, flour, pulses, rice. And forget about comparing it to India, but as a regular hawker, a regular auto wala. And there was a point of time where the I would say for like a 2 minute or a 3 minute distance, I had to give 400 Sri Lankans. So that is the level, that is the current rate. So first I thought maybe he's trying to mug, some money out of me, because 400 Sri Lankans is a huge. So then I asked him, is it the general trend? And everywhere it is being felt. Like whether it is tourism, whether it is the tourism industry is being hit pretty bad. But on the contrary, sir, infrastructure development is high. So I to understand what is this significance or the level of infrastructure on the beach. I'm near the beach, sir. So there are a lot of constructions happening. So that means somebody is investing, and there are like 24, 25 floors high rise buildings which are being built. That means somebody is investing, and somebody in that investment may have come as an, either it is office space or an accommodation, or something like that. So I reached out to the top of my hotel, and I looked everywhere. The construction was massive, so it's just not my area. So as far as I can see, there are buildings being constructed. So I asked my tuk-tuk wala to take me to the base of the heart of Colombo. And sir, the construction was evident everywhere. New buildings, new blocks, new houses, which means that yes, the money is now back into circling the economy. But is it hurting the common masses? Absolutely yes. Now it really depends upon the current system, the current regime, to decide and decipher as to what their ecosystem, to plan a policy, to give them some sense of I would say a leeway in terms of some relaxations, some sort of not even to strengthening the economy per se, but at least some relaxations and leeways in terms of taxation. But the tax is also increasing, sir. So maybe this infrastructure development that I saw could have been picked up from the pockets of the common people, which are currently overburdened in this. But yes, uh, I spoke to even the rich of the rich, to those from the marginal communities. All of them have been collectively hit from the economic
Yeah,
perspective.
that's okay. So you've given a good picture that this is a nation which is collectively hit. Everyone is suffering, but they're braving it out. And you also given a picture that there is money coming into Sri Lanka by way of construction and infrastructure development and all, which is happening. So I think it's not as if everything is down in the dumps and nothing is happening. So there is some activity going on. Right. So yeah, we'll just wait for Anant to get back online.
I'm here, sir. I'm here.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Anand, I'll stay out. Carry on. I'll be available on audio for you, right? So just
Right,
carry
sir.
on and talk about whom all you met. What did you do there? Whom did you speak to? And what are your impressions of whatever you spoke? And what questions were asked to you? Give us a brief of that before we go on to India-Sri Lanka relations and all that.
Absolutely. So I had the distinct pleasure to address the audience at their defense university. Now it's very unique in its own way, because we ourselves are struggling from the fate of what the NDU will turn up. They already have a KDU, which is their defense university per se. I had the pleasure of speaking to the audience there. I discussed what the 2024 for West Asia appears to be, and trying to make a prediction as to what are the challenges that West Asia currently faces, and how will it go down the line as we progress into the following months. On that thought, sir, today I had the pleasure of addressing the audience at their premier think tank, Institute for National Security Studies, INSS. And today, because Sri Lanka's top think tank, I try to make a case for why Sri Lanka uh, is going to get affected by the crisis in West Asia. Because if we look at what should, so I discussed a variety, whether it is import of essential goods, materials, and energy resources, export of its products to international market, which I tried to make a case as to why there's going to be an increasing delay. Shipping cost is going to increase. Supply chain uncertainties are going to hit Sri Lanka are going to get hit into in Sri Lanka. Now, again, in terms of, I made a case on energy imports, how the oil imports is going to make a significant portion of its energy. But again, Red Sea was a crucial passage for them. So the transportation of oil from the Middle East to Sri Lanka, there's going to be delay. But then the alternative routes are coming up. So now their proposal is to go from the Cape of Good Hope, which means they're essentially not coming into Southeast Asia at all, which also not only going to increase the transportation cost but the insurance costs, as well as the oil imports, which is going to increase the prices of energy in various sectors, impacting Sri Lanka's economy. It's not big, but it's important for Sri Lanka to survive, because with the kind of infrastructure development happening here, the progress that I see during my stay here, uh, on the contrary, increasing insurance premiums for the ships, for the Sri Lankan ships navigating to these waters, it's something that may at some point of time be unimaginable, for Colombo to pay, because Colombo is dependent entirely on maritime transport. Hence, a rise in shipping cost will not only affect the competitiveness of its exports, but will increase the import of goods as well. Hence, there's also going to be a supply chain disruption. So I made a case as to why the Sri Lanka's trade, which it used to be at some point of time efficient and reliable on supply chains, there's going to be a disruption in all of them, affecting the timely delivery of goods. And also, it's going to be because of the untimely delivery of goods. The challenging for industries will probably more felt in textile and apparel. So, but then I also give them the positive component of it. The first thing that I said about is Sri Lanka should not wait to think about the container corporations or the Maersk like organizations, enterprises are going to worry about the routes or going to make a suitable route for them. It needs to diversify its own trade routes, create their own engagement, have bilateral relations, and expand engagements with Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. That is the right time to engage with ASEAN, engage with India more progressively, with India, ASEAN, and Sri Lanka coming in together in a regional forum, and also alternatively identify maritime routes, strengthening relation with create or strengthen new trade partners, which will ensure and mitigate the risks, creating a resilient trade ecosystem. I tried to make a case for them, and they were very interesting questions that when I put down the mic, and they some of these interesting questions came in on, because it was again West Asia. So they said, you're talking about Sri Lanka, but India has a very different stance. So the idea was on the 3rd of January, President of Sri Lanka announced that he will send the naval ships to West Asia, to the Red Sea. But there is some contemplation happening regarding that decision in Colombo, and I could feel the heat of that decision, because those questions on should Sri Lanka send the navy ships to West Asia came up over and over and over again. And a good professor popped up a question and said, I'm going to ask you for the third time, is it a good decision for Sri Lanka to send ships? If it is, give us pros and give us cons. Most of the questions were also around what India's stand is, because when Sri Lanka joined coalition, there were questions as to will India join the coalition or not. So people were interested. Will I foresee India joining a coalition with the US? And I told them very categorically no, because we've got an independent foreign policy that does not rely on an alliance. And second, we've got our assets deployed not only for the protection of assets, technical assets, or the container ships flowing in the region, not only India's but also as a responsible stakeholder, which we have already been playing for a very long time. So it's not something that we do it for new, and it's not something a new maneuver. And then they argued that, do you think this is something what Sri Lanka should do? And I said, yes, absolutely. I am of the proponent that Sri Lanka is been out of the strategic game for quite a long time, and now the time has come for Sri Lanka to engage with the European Union more aggressively. This also means engaging the naval ships in a component in a time where it will not only interact with the European or the Western naval ships, it will also get the necessary experience of engaging in a real time exercise or a real time maneuver. Because what I feel from the naval officers interaction or from the army commanders that I spoke to, they've been doing simulations for so long, so I feel they've been disconnected from the real time engagement. So port calls and bilateral exercises are fine, but then they don't give you the real-time exposure or the real-time experience that one can get from the current crisis. And I'm of the proponent. I told the good professor the same thing. I'm of the proponent that they should engage in the time of opportunity, because they're going to give the rich experience Sri Lankan Navy requires. Then there were questions about the current crisis going in Gaza, and what is the Iran role in Gaza. And there were a lot of questions on Iran posed to me, sir. And I gave them the idea that Iran has. It is again my opinion that Iran has demonstrated its ability to bring Israel and US bogged down in Mid East in a time where we all have almost forgotten what is happening in Nagorno-Karabakh or what is happening in Russia, Ukraine. We have almost forgotten, we've almost forgotten all those the conflicts, what happens in Afghanistan. I mean, we have been discussing it quite a long time, but nobody else is trying to refocus or even engage in these theaters, with everyone focused on what is going to happen to Gaza. So those questions were popped up to me, and I argued that Iran has made a strong stance, which many of them felt that yes, Iran is reappearing in the strategic game ecosystem when it holds a larger play. But then I argued that if Iran comes back, then and without a ceasefire, without exchange of hostages, Israel and Iran are not going to go sit together, because currently they are head over heels to get back at each other. So it's interesting to see how the both countries can be called on by Qatar, UAE, and American initiatives to have both of them even before the hostages is being exchanged. So it's interesting to see how the geopolitics in West Asia is going to pan out. I've got a lot
Yeah.
of questions on
Now,
the.
yeah, bolo bolo.
I've got a lot of questions on the changing battlefield, sir. I mean,
Okay.
Israel being a small army, how do they do? What are they? How are they able to? I would say, pose a defense and offense at the same time. And the role of artificial intelligence is going to change the battle game. Is going to change how we used to think about battle from the early 10th or the 11th century. The evolution of battlefield have changed. Probably, sir, you studied, and I mean, you studied much way early in the battle school. When I studied in various institutions that I was part of, the battles were fought in from a conventional stance, and during my time I saw a trend moving towards the unconventional game together. But now with a smaller swarms of drones flying in, you don't even have to be in the battlefield. So you can remotely control it and access it from anywhere and all across the world. So the idea is it's changing, and there were questions on how Israel is posing at is deterring those
Okay.
offenses. So,
Yeah, we'll leave Israel and West Asia out and let Sri Lanka, if they want to take ships there, they can. But
sir.
let's focus on the basic. You've given an idea of how Sri Lanka is internally. You've given an idea of how they're trying to get into the Western coalition and all that. But tell me, what are the sense you got of the Sri Lanka India relations? And how do you see them going and how it is?
So let me be very equivocal in my comment by saying I felt a very strong commitment, very strong, I would say, voices for an India-Sri Lanka relations in a positive way that I can't imagine. And at certain point of time during my engagement with the senior defense officials, when I said that Colombo and New Delhi are, it's growing and the strength is going, and I'm very proud to say that our relationship is growing beyond. They said it's not only growing, it's evolving in a way that we have never seen with any other country. The level of trust and confidence is massive, which is going beyond the roof. So this is the sense of positivity that I felt. And this is and sir, it's not only this, but the sense of confidence from the trade corporations which I had, I would say, the time to engage with them. But they're also trying to conclude the India Sri Lanka bilateral investment agreement in 2024. They've studied the agreement. They are very keen on doing it, and they're also focusing that to balance this agreement, they do the RCEP, the regional comprehensive economic partnership, and they're also not trying to do it with India, but they're also expanding. So that means their vision is growing. So they're trying to bring in with India, Thailand, and they're also intend to do it with China. However, I did focus on bringing or creating new trade and supply chain opportunities and not going to China, because their experiences from China has given them and even the entire world that they're not reliable, and how their negotiations are. Now, sir, there's in terms of the trade, what happened is there is some stabilization in terms of FTA talks, and Sri Lanka did announce two of its larger foreign investments in terms of the late 2023, but their massive focus is on improving infrastructure development. And at one of my conversations with the senior geological survey representative, he said that the 700 million West Container Terminal at the port of Colombo, which they're doing it a joint venture between India's Adani Group and Sri Lanka's John Keel's Holdings. This initiative is going to be so fruitful because the project is going to expand the capacity of the port, which will eventually bring that will convert this port to 26th largest container port. And in addition to this, the US Development Finance Corporation has also announced to co-finance the port of providing almost around 553 million for the project. And but then so the Chinese group is also here, and it's not something that I expressed my apprehensions. The Sinopec group, which is also going to, I mean, it's again not a done deal, but they're also going to operate about 200 fuel filling stations in Sri Lanka, and they've proposed to invest over 4.5 billion in an oil refinery, which we all know where, in the low profit of Hambantota port. Now, but again, coming back to the India Sri Lanka alliance engagement, not alliance, but Sri Lanka has concluded an initial agreement among key bilateral creditors, which is India for sure, and the Paris Club to restructure almost like 5.96 billion in external debt. And this is going to be a big change for in the context of the growing trend towards India. But I also fear that Chinese investment firms are also looking for an eye. So, sir, in the terms of, if I also met the World Bank official station here, and the World Bank expects that the Sri Lanka's GDP will grow in 2024 to 1.7%. Now, negative, I may say so. So in 2023, it was negative 3.8%. And coming in from a positive 1.7% in 2024, which is like almost a year, and they've covered that distance, is commendable. And also, let me tell you, sir, in 2022, it was negative 7.8%. So they've not only brought in this larger, so in 2022 to 2024, almost like 13-14% kind of difference they've easily covered. But again, there is some backwardness, there is some, I would say, a backlash in the decision, which has resulted in a nominal conversation of recruitment and jobs and insecurities. There are no job opportunities. The percentage of people living beneath the US dollar 3.65 is doubled to 25% from the last 2 years. Child malnutrition has increased. So I had the opportunity to speak to the UNICEF representatives as well. Instead of that, sir, there are many structural reforms within key institutions. So state-owned enterprises. I had one of the two that I spoke to. Then the argument that they made was to make an inclusive growth. There is important for policymakers and decision makers to understand that privatization is important. They have not privatized the state-owned enterprises like we are trying to do. So MTNL, BSNL merging, you've got certain stakeholders, we've got ATMs, we've got other financial investment initiatives coming in, which is absolutely devoid here. But they've retained state-owned enterprises, including one of the few hotels and the Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation. Also, the education system seems to be a bit off. So I had the opportunity to speaking to two principals of schools. So they feel that the education system is still needs to get updated. The labor laws remains outdated. There is limited infrastructure. There's limited infrastructure as well as support in terms of government policies for agriculture basis, which also need to reform, sir. That is the reason why,
Yeah, in fact,
sir, sir.
in fact, if I interject, the reason for their downfall to a large extent is because of the agricultural reforms which they undertook without thinking too much. So I agree
Sir.
with you. They say that they want to reform agriculture, there's a lot of sense in what they're doing. Right. So
Right,
this
sir.
is what
Right.
I mean. You obviously very clearly Sri Lanka is trying to get ahead of the game, and it is progressing back, and it wants to strengthen its relationship with India. My next question to you is, how do they look at what's happening between India and Maldives, and did we get a sense of that?
So I really got a sense of that. And there were a lot of anxiety towards what is happening to between India and Maldives. How is India taking it in the first place? And I told them we don't have to take anything. We have given our responses. It was undiplomatic what happened, and it's condemnable, completely condemnable, and shouldn't have happened. But there is also a point that not many knew in Sri Lanka. To be very honest, sir, I had to educate them that the only objective, one of the key objectives, if I may call it, for the president of Maldives to shun down the Indian army was to bring in Chinese army, and he is
Mm,
very keen on bringing Chinese assets. Now, sir, for long as I remember, for decades, the Maldivian forces have been trained by us, Dorniers, ALHs, light helicopters, and other air assets are already with them. They've been training on it for as long as I can remember. Bringing in Chinese investments in terms of assets, in terms of air assets, and learning the language, because all of them are in their own dialect. So it's how are they going to adapt for one thing, for something that we have been trained them for 30 long years. Now the as I told them the same thing, that we don't interact or engage with leadership. We engage with the people. And what does the people of
people.
will of the people say? The will of the people says that we don't stand with the president. So now it is for them to decide whether they do not stand with the president or what they need to do with the president. But we have made our stance at diplomatic levels very clear. We
Okay.
sent a note to the High Commissioner.
Hey, but
He
look, that's what we just think. How the question is, how do the Sri Lankan feels
so that
about
is
this
that is
whole
where I'm
story?
getting at. So they've seen all of that. What I'm trying to tell you is they've seen all of that, but the interpretation is they weren't educated, or they didn't make out that it is all a Chinese ploy. So I had to give them the idea that yes, it is about the Chinese ploy. And then they said, "So, do you think the Chinese will do something like this with any other state?" And I asked them the same, and I told them the same thing, that because it's not about Maldives, we also need to understand what is happening in Myanmar. So it's something that then the Sri Lankans are like, "Oh, so do you think the Chinese are there in Myanmar?" And I educated them again as to the Chinese have a tendency to behave in such a way, and these are lessons that they should learn. So I educated them from the experience of the Taliban when Mutaki met Yang Yi, who said, who in the argument about Mess Ainak and Ahmad Darya said that, we know what you did with Sri Lanka. So even they studied what the Chinese did in Sri Lanka. So the argument is, if they know what they did with you, it is important for Sri Lanka to understand that going towards the
What is
Chinese
happening
angle
elsewhere?
is, yes, absolutely, absolutely, sir. So this is something that I had to educate. But then yes, they've got some idea, but I don't think so, sir. That they still feel there are certain sections of people who are divided over the contestations or the involvement of China. So I am not. This is what I feel, sir, and I have not interacted with too many to make an account. But what I had my interactions with, I felt division between those who understood that yes, it's a Chinese ploy, versus those who felt like maybe it's something else but not a Chinese ploy.
So, well, in that context, how do you see the relations between China and Sri Lanka in post this crisis? How do you see, what is the general attitude of Sri Lankans vis-a-vis Chinese and set off against India?
Well, the happy part is, I'm staying in a hotel that is very prominent for Europeans and tourists, if I may call it. I didn't find any Chinese here. Now, this does not negate the fact that the Chinese may have been residing elsewhere, but during my visit to the main city of Colombo, I didn't see anyone. Now they've got a dedicated. So what I understand from they've got a China hotel. So perhaps they may been isolating themselves to China, to their own China hotel. But I didn't see them on the streets. I didn't see them. I didn't see any of them here during my time, during my stay here, sir. So I am of the opinion. So they may have been keeping to themselves and coming rarely out, if they are, because I've seen a lot of different nationalities, Russians, even Iranians, even from those from Tehran, who I had the opportunity to interact. They're large in numbers, and they visit in this time in this year, and like in this time every year. So I didn't see any Chinese. So what I understand from that connotation is they don't visit much. But I really have to go deep, and have to interact with the tourism ministry, which I aim to do tomorrow, as to what is the level of the Chinese engagement happening in, whether the Chinese tourists are coming in, because they've certainly made a comparison. And during my discussion, that came as to, India is now fifth in Maldives, and China is now the first in in tourist attraction points. So and I asked them very bluntly, I mean, do you want the Chinese again? Do you want the Chinese back? So they were all silent, sir. They didn't say no, they didn't say yes, but they were largely silent. But what I know from certain interactions in the military leadership, or in the defense department, or the defense leadership, they're not very positive with Chinese. They don't. So I spoke to a few locals about China, and they were not positive either. So this points towards my limit conclusion on the basis of limited, I would
Yeah, that's
say.
okay. Whatever. That we are looking at your interaction and your impressions. That is at times,
Yeah,
many times, those impressions are something which we can keep theorizing from wherever we are, but meeting firsthand and getting this thing is important. And how do
absolutely.
you see their, or did you get an opportunity to assess their relationship with Pakistan? Why Pakistan? Because Sri Lanka and Pakistan have had a good relationship in days gone by. But where do they stand today? That's the question.
Sir, I feel that there is a cordial relationship between Sri Lanka and Pakistan. Now, sir, there's not major investment happening. I mean, forget about Pakistan; they can't even
Yeah,
invest in their own. But 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 yes, I found when during my travels to the Colombo, I found one lovely couple from Gujranwala, and so that means that there are a few here. Now, there was only one that I found to my surprise, and during my interaction with them, uh, they were like they didn't find anyone of like themselves. So probably no Pakistani beside a few. The
yeah.
tourism, in terms of tourism and in terms of I would say soft power engagement, I don't think so, sir, that the Sri Lankans are any more focused on engaging with Pakistan, or they have, because I think their efforts have largely been developing inward. So they've moved out from the policy of expansion in terms of relations to inward development. So this is something that I see. But yes, because I met one over lunch. So probably, sir, there could be more, but not in a capacity, not in a way that it would have been at some point of time. I mean, they did took help. I mean, we all know the ships, Pakistani ships, came in for refueling here. So they do
Okay.
make port calls, sir. They do make port calls, but that is diplomatic maneuver, defense
Yeah.
diplomacy, sir.
Okay. Let's take some questions. There are a few questions which people have come up with, right?
So
The first question is, what's the public sentiment like right now regarding us? We are the only ones who helped them in a crisis, literally. But I still feel Sri Lanka, Maldives, Bangladesh are filled with ingrates.
definitely not filled with ingrates. I mean, I can't say about Maldives. I mean, we all have witnessed what Maldives is. So maybe,
Yeah,
uh,
Maldives. Leave Bangladesh and Maldives out. Let's talk of Sri Lanka.
yeah. So no, sir. So yes, there's a positive public statement for us. People were happy when they saw me, and the irony is, I don't look like a South Indian. So they stopped their tuk-tuks, like our autos, three-wheelers, and they said, Tamil Nadu, Tamil Nadu. So I told them, no, not Tamil Nadu, Delhi. So, so but then they were happy. They were really happy. And then they go above and beyond local population talking. They go above and beyond. The connectivity between two people is extremely strong, and they understand, they respect, the values are still there. So they go above and beyond to help us. They're very humble, they're very polite. So I'm in awe, with our relations, and I hope it answers the question.
Yeah. So, right. So the next question which we will take is, okay, this is what, right now Sri
Oh,
Lanka might appear to be favorable to us. But what happens when Rajpaksas 2.0, as in pro-China government, come to power? We'll be back to square one and hard work will be undone. It's tiresome. I mean, that's a view that, we could go back. Did you get a feeling of that kind?
sir, if I summarize my entire engagement with the local people, military leadership, defense ministry officials, um, Rajapaksa, nobody is positive about it. So not even the people. So the argument is they're not going back, and they've realized that where they've come today with infrastructure and coming. I mean, open my window and I see a building which is being constructed. So that level of engagement being happening. Uh, no Rajapaksa 2.0 is happening, and there may be discontent. Everybody is discontent about the governments. I mean, we've had our own share. People will Some will agree, some will disagree, but uh, they unanimously agree that Rajapaksa is going to come back, and they don't want him to be back. So this is a general content from them, from their side, I feel,
Yeah,
in this.
that's a fair one. That's a fair one. Okay. Rahul says the last show with Anant was really good. Glad he is back. So that's a great compliment to you. I
Thank you
also
so much,
agree
Nisa.
with Rahul because that's why I called him back. I call him back, right? It's not necessary that in gunner shot that we always have the high and mighty and the people with great name talking. I believe I would like to tell everyone that we need to have a conversation with people who are knowledgeable about a thing. For me, knowledge is more important. Name is just it's an any name. And
So,
uh, you know, I also must tell everyone who's watching Gunner Shot, and this is a place where I'd like to give young people a chance to speak and express themselves. Okay, every time you can't have a guy who's going to open the innings and bat for a century. If that happens, what happens to the rest of the people in the middle order and the tail? Right? And at some point of time, people in the middle order have to go up. And unless they get used to it, that's how it is. I mean, Anant is obviously a young, bright mind. And I'm sure that when he looks back on all these talks he's had on Gunner Shot, he'll feel good about it. And that's more important to me than, everything else. And that's why I tell everyone, please subscribe to Gunner Shot because here you will get something unique which you will not get in any other channel. Right. And so that's how it is. But then that's a different story. Okay. Okay. Now let's take this question. So recently, Indian government asked its citizens to travel to Sri Lanka. Is it the right time to visit there? How costly is it now? What is our long-term policy with Sri Lanka for business and defense? I mean, there are two, three questions. You can take one each.
Yes, it's absolutely the right time, and you must visit because understand what government to government relations. It doesn't really matter. The government will come, new government will come, the government will change. The sentiments of the people are something that one has to understand. If you do not interact with those you've studied that India has a relationship. When you're part of India, you're part of the same system. You are the one, you get to choose who's doing who's the right system, what is right perfect mechanism for you. But talking about Sri Lanka India is incomplete when you don't come to Sri Lanka, and when you don't come and interact with the sabji wala, the bhaji wala, the confectionery store wala, the auto wala, and then when you hear, oh, you're from Tamil Nadu, that's something, that's something that it excites it excites any Indian. So sir, to be very honest, I was taking pride in myself when I said I'm very happy. I'm not gonna see another Indian for the next 5 days. And I was I sir, I on the first day of check-in, sir, I had four Indians standing in front of me. They literally ruined the plans, and I told them the same thing. I came with a high hope that I don't want to see another Indian for the next 5 days. I saw four of them on the day I was checking in. So sir, the idea is you must come, and it's a good time to come because it's pretty hot, but at times it's a little breeze. You see how the development is. Interact with people, talk to them about how they feel. If you don't interact, if you don't engage, then you can't leave the engagement part only to the government. No, it is responsibility for you as well to come in. And I'm not proponent of Sri Lankan tourism here. I'm of the proponent of people to people diplomacy, people to people engagement. So you must come. And in terms of cost, yes, inflation is going to affect you. There are petty things that are going to be costly. I am using dollars to do my transactions. Similarly, this is what everybody does here. I try to change Indian currency with Sri Lankan LKR. The denominations are high. They've got a note of 5,000 as well. So you may see that, oh, 5,000 is huge, but uh, by the time the bill comes out, 5,000 is nothing. It finishes
Okay.
off. So
Right.
so so yes, it's a bit expensive, but spend a weekend, talk to people. It's not far. Go to Jaffna, visit Jaffna, visit areas. Yes, but yes, you must engage with the people.
Okay. Uh, right. Now, Akash says it's a most enjoyable talk. That's a compliment to you. Then, of course, Tamil visitor to Sri Lanka may bring a lot of insights to Sri Lankan attitudes towards India. Yes, I suppose so. If you send a Tamilian, he will get better insights, which I think even Anant has mentioned.
Sir, not only that, sir. Um, if I may, sir, so the argument here is not just about the Tamilians. It would happen at any point of time. It's whether even if Mumbaikars come in, they give an idea. Just like I came from Delhi, so somebody said, "Oh, but Delhi is too hot." At summers, and it's too cold in winters. So, sir, I went to the airport at 9 degrees, and I exited Sri Lankan airport with a half sleeve. So yes, people will be surprised to hear how cold it is. And but yes, you do bring your own perceptions. But let us not isolate ourselves, our minds to Tamils.
Yeah,
It is one
more about
fact.
India, more about India.
More about India. Yeah, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah,
sir.
okay. So the next question is, how is Sri Lankan society likely to react if China militarizes Hambantota? Will it not lead to a new rule under foreign control for Sri Lanka?
Now that's a very far-fetched thought about military anything. It doesn't really have to do with Sri Lanka. You can't militarize. So the word that he used, the Vishwanathan has used, sir, is militarize Hambantota. You can't in a democratic state. Nobody can uh, at least legitimately militarize anything. And Hambantota is a port, so you can't militarize a port. But what you can do is, so the question, what sounds to me like, if China brings deployment in, let's say, a temporary deployment in Hambantota, in a similar posture like we did in Maldives, is it possible? Uh, yes, it is possible, but I don't think so. It will happen because the Hambantota experience has taught a lot, and bringing military, particularly with now growing relations, expanding relations with India, Adani port coming in. So yes, so we are the counterpart. We are the ones who are countering the Chinese. We are countering on the context of Hambantota. So yes, we are the alternative. Let me use the appropriate word. We are the alternative, and
Yeah,
we are more
fine.
lucrative. So yes, so it will not lead to a new rule. No, it is not going to lead to a new rule in Sri Lanka.
Okay, I think that time has passed. Are there any academic ties between IIT Madras and Sri Lankan Institute? There are. There is some talk going on for us to set up something in Sri Lanka and for more Sri Lankan students coming. The contours of that are not fully out, but it is there. So let's not this thing.
It's very
Uh,
interesting. I saw a few, I would say, veterans, aeronautical engineers, veterans who, as Sri Lankan residents, studied in IIT Madras in the early 90s.
yeah, yeah.
So I assume, sir, I assume that this
Yeah,
relationship is growing, but I didn't have the opportunity to interact with technical institutions here. Um, and I would probably, in my another visit to Colombo, I
yeah,
may
fine,
interact
no
with
problem.
them. So,
But I'm telling you what I know because IIT Madras is in talk with the Sri Lankan government to set up something there, right?
right, sir.
Uh, is talk of youth interactions and private sector cooperation. I think it's a little too early for youth interaction and private sector cooperation to start off in a big way. Private sector cooperation is anyway happening with Ambani, right? With not the Adani port, the Colombo West terminal. So it's there. So I don't rule it out, but specific no. This is an interesting question. Why UPI not useful in Sri Lanka? UPI is a
Sir,
good idea. I don't know. Yeah, yeah,
I've
your
kind of
view, Anand.
proposed it, sir. I kind of proposed it during my argument with financial institutions, investment institutions, when I had the opportunity to discuss with them. And, sir, I think it's too soon, in my opinion. Now, I'm not an economist. I'm not a financial guy, but I know in Sri Lanka's ability to invest, or expand their invest or even call for greater investments. I think they've done a very good decision by bringing infrastructure, because if you don't bring infrastructure, you don't have companies coming in. There is no point of attraction. So I must make a remark here, and I said the same thing during my lecture. Sri Lanka is not a tourist hub. It's a strategic base with a lot of, I would say, probability, possibility for greater engagement and interaction. And the moment it realizes, in the context of Sri Lanka's foreign policy, that it is a tourist hub, people will take Sri Lanka as a tourist hub, not as a strategic partner. So Colombo has to get out of the notion that it is a tourist destination. No, it is a strategic partner in Indo-Pacific. So
Okay,
this notion
that's
needs
fine.
to come in Colombo, sir.
Yeah, I think that's an important point you made. Okay, the IT said, Abhi YT, he says, Sir, I'm in 12th. I want to do my MBA. Any advice? Any look, first and foremost, do your degree well. Okay, MBA बहुत दूर की बात है. MBA is just a this thing, so don't worry. Okay, don't get upset. Yeah, Abhishek Ambani has says China. I mean, he's got a set of things. I'll go through it. China
So,
has a very strong influence in Sri Lanka, particularly among the military. And he says Chinese construction workers installed the communication cable outside the houses of the defense is resident. Yeah, possible. After all, Chinese are not sitting at home. And then he says he says, give me a call.
so
Uh,
I don't know how to take
uh,
this.
yeah, if you do visit Sri Lanka, actually, Abhishek, Anant is right now sitting in Sri Lanka. So if you do want him to give you a call or something or get in touch with you, you have to let him know how to get in touch with you. That's important. Okay,
So,
so that's how it is. Yeah, this is again an interesting question. Can Sri Lanka become what Hong Kong became vis-a-vis China was and is?
no, sir. I don't think so.
Um,
Hong Kong, Hong Kong was a different ball game altogether. So it's like apples and
altogether,
oranges.
yeah.
It's You can't compare Hong Kong. And the sense of, let me tell you, Sri Lankans are very nationalist. So you wouldn't expect them to become Hong Kong, and they have a sense of pride towards their identity as Sri Lankans. So during my interaction in the local market, they started telling me as to why Sri Lanka is not doing in cricket, and they said, "You guys do so well. There is no Muralidharan. There is no Chamandavas happening here." And then they were very discontent towards the fact that Sri Lankan cricket team is not doing well, and they were very sad about it. I can see it in their face that they were like, "How is it? We need another Virat Kohli of our own." So that's the level of nationalism that comes in. It doesn't really matter whether it's sports or anything else. But sir, this reflects that they are sad, they are disappointed. They are expecting Sri Lankan team to perform well. So this possibility reflects on all fronts, whether economic, strategic, defense. So they're very nationalist. They're not going to become Hong Kong.
Yeah, fine. I understand. Okay. You can any comments on the JBP leaders' visit to Kerala? Look, let me answer this. You don't answer this.
So
It's a Sri Lanka is a democracy. So are we. And if political parties meet other political parties, we shouldn't get upset about it. Neither will they get upset beyond the point. You see, every political party of a country, when its opposition or those who are antithetical to it, go out and meet others, they'll feel bad. This is a normal thing. The good thing the way I look at it is this JVP people are coming out and meeting with. I don't know. I didn't know that they had gone to Kerala, to be very honest. Whether they go to Kerala or Delhi or Calcutta, at least they're going out and meeting. And we're opening up. We're opening up channels of communication, right? Look at it in the positive point of view. Okay. We've done with all the questions, right?
so
Uh, I thought it was a very enjoyable talk you gave us because you
so
gave us a lot of gyan of what's happening today in Sri Lanka, right?
so
And okay, so before I finish off, give me
so.
the next 2 minutes. What are your final impressions of what your entire visit and Sri Lanka, which you had over the past 3 days?
So it's again that I said, it's not a tourist destination. It is a strategic player in the Indo-Pacific. The moment we feel that, oh, hum chutti manane Sri Lanka ja rahe hain, we also need to understand the point that Sri Lanka is a strategic player. It has its own expectations. We may foresee from the prisons of where we are, confined to either New Delhi or Cambodia or Laos, wherever we are, Sri Lanka is independent to make its own decisions. Does it want to engage in New Delhi in finance and wants to engage in China in, let's say, investment? It's their its own decision. We are there to give them support, as we all are as stakeholders. But we should not make an opinion like for example, somebody I met who said there is Al Qaeda in Sri Lanka and there's recruitment happening in marginalized society. So that shouldn't be the case of propositions that we make comments on Sri Lanka just like this. I feel more, I wouldn't say responsible when I am now saying that yes, Sri Lanka is a growing economy. I am not of the opinion, or I'm not one of those proponents who say Sri Lanka is still struggling. So the output has changed. The outcome of my vision has changed when I came in and I saw the infrastructure development happening in the first place. So Sri Lanka is doing great, sir. Let me be very honest in my last comments, and I'm very happy that they are making progress. It really depends upon. It really boils down to how the political parties or the leadership intends to take ahead. But what I foresee is they are doing investments positively. There is growth. There is prospects of growth, and I foresee that in a few years, Sri Lanka is going to progress economically, militaristically, strategically, and I really hope that it goes beyond the Indo-Pacific domain.
Right. Thanks a lot. I think you've given a good view of Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka which has started progressing, which probably has now come to a thing where it has realized that it has some tremendous strategic value, and it probably has started realizing that how it has to balance itself with everyone, the bigger powers of the region like China and India. And it is, the thought that they're wanting to send ships to the Middle East indicates that they want to reintegrate into the global architecture in some form, right? Which is a positive thing. So a lot of positive things. And I also feel that it is up to India, right, as to how we handle Sri Lanka without getting into the problems which we had with them earlier, or without being overbearing on them. Because what's happening in Sri Lanka, what's happening in Maldives today actually happened in Sri Lanka day before yesterday, right? And we've come out of it. So we need to nurture this relationship and take it forward so that the Chinese don't come back and sit there. And we should also be realistic about what the Chinese are doing there. They have a stake. They own Hambantota for the next 97 years. It's only 2 years since it has passed, right? And you cannot wish them away. So we will have to contend with them. But the positive thing is they are no more a overt presence, right? They are today, their presence is subdued. Our presence there has increased, and we need to keep it this way. But this all is left for me to do today evening is thank you, Anant. Thanks for taking time to talk from Sri Lanka, which is important
So
to everyone who's watching this program. And thank you. And when we get back, we'll talk of other things. Goodbye. Good evening. Have a great night there. And Jai Hind.